Welcome back to Romance of the Three Games. First up is Stage 2 of Wu's Musu mode, playing as Sun Jian. Last time we saw Sun Jian capture the Yellow Turban fortress commanded by Zhang Bao, one of the Yellow Turban leaders. And this time we're going to be seeing the other Yellow Turban primary commander Zhang Liang be taken on as we attempt to break a siege around one of the castles belonging to the Han forces. All of this is in preparation for the final stage of this act of Musu mode, in which we must take on Zhang Jian, who is the actual leader of the whole Yellow Turban rebellion and one of the main instigators. This stage is probably meant to be the first stage you play in the game. As I said last time, I decided to do them in a little bit of reverse order to make my first stage more historical for my chosen character, Sun Jian. The objective is to defeat Zhang Liang, as I said, and Hung Fu Song is the Han commander we have to save. And now this level is actually a little bit harder than the second level, because Huang Fu Song is going to be quite a burden. You lose if your commander is defeated, and he isn't going to do very much to stop himself being defeated, which we'll see a little bit later on. So the setup initially is that we have a castle surrounded by enemy units, and we're doing this three-way pincer from the east, west and south, with forces belonging to each of the future three kingdoms in order to try and free the besieged force inside belonging to the Han Empire. I started off just by taking out a few of the initial enemies. You don't really need to defeat these enemies because the enemy general is right in front of you when you begin, the general Guan Hai, as we see here. So defeating the enemies only really serves to lower his morale, so that you could move on without defeating him and allow your allies to do it for you. But in this case I decided to kill him myself and then move on. I'm going to be taking an interesting route through the level in order to try and preempt some of Huang Fu Song's annoying behaviour, so that I can minimise the damage he's going to do to our forces with his unfortunate strategies. You can see I've jumped over to the west side of the map, running through the castle, which actually has its gates open, so it's not much of a siege. I'm coming out on the northwest side, where there's another small force of enemy units and an enemy officer, Huang Shao, waiting around. And now I'm going to do battle with him in order to clear up another one of the castle gates in preparation for my move to save the Han commander. So while I take out these enemies, let me tell you a little bit about the Yellow Turban Rebellion, because the game really fails to do so. It does tell you a few details which are correct. The basic details being that it's a rebellion based around the corruption of the Han Empire, combined with an increasing religious movement based around this Yellow Turban sect. The Yellow Turban uprising was kind of like two uprisings in one. It was both a religious and a communist uprising almost. The religion in question was Taoism, specifically Zhang Jiao's personal form of Taoism. By the way, the guy the game calls Zhang Jian, the leader of the Yellow Turban Rebellion, is known as Zhang Jue historically, and I'm not sure why the game decided to change his name. Lots of Koei games change his name. Possibly Dynasty Warriors 7 changes it back to the historic one, if I vaguely remember correctly. Dynasty Warriors 7 made a lot of tweaks to the way they did the storytelling to make it more accurate, particularly the accurate pronunciation of names. So for example, I'm currently fighting with the forces of a man that the game calls Cao Cao, a rather stupid name in English, but his name, although spelled Cao Cao, is pronounced Cao Cao, with the TS sound filling in for the letter C. Other examples would be Sun Quan in the game should actually be pronounced Sun Chuan. Well, there's countless ones, and in Dynasty Warriors 7 I believe they clear that up. Anyway, the Yellow Turban Rebellion, as I was saying, was based around the fact that the Han Empire was super corrupt because of this system of regents it had, which would use the Emperor as puppets for their own gain. Not to mention the fact that the entire country was in dire poverty for 200 years. Here we have a special event in the stage.
Heavens, save the children of the Yellow Turban. Strike down those that do us harm.
So Zhang Liang, the enemy commander, has decided to summon a rainstorm. Not too impressive, but it's going to make Huang Fu Song go a little bit crazy.
What of it? I too shall join the
So he decides to join the battle, and at this stage, in this level, you have to race towards Huang Fu Song, because he's going to start committing suicide, he decides to just rush forward into this rainstorm, and of course he is instantly ambushed by enemy forces who moved up under the cover of the rain. So you have to jump into the river in the castle here and start taking out the forces. If you leave them, you will lose, which is why this battle is slightly difficult, because if you're a first time player and the game gives you no indication that Huang Fusong won't be able to fight out of this, he basically can't, because of the morale system I described last time. He's unit spawns in with higher morale than Huang Fusong has, which means if you don't intervene in the conflict, Yi will always win regardless of troop type, troop number, position, anything like that. So you have to overcome this kind of exploitative AI by getting in there yourself and just killing him. This reduces his unit's morale to 0, and then you can leave safely, and Huang Fusong will be able to defeat the remaining troops without taking a single loss to his own unit. So after this section I decided to move to the northeast part of the map in order to link up with Sun Jian's actual forces. I had left Sun Jian's forces to fight an enemy officer, Liu Pi, who you can see me defeating now, on the same logic that I knew Sun Jian's unit had higher morale than Liu Pi did, which meant I could safely allow my troops to engage with his, knowing that they would not be defeated. You can check the morale by going into the start menu at any point during the battle and checking unit information, and this is very useful for planning your personal route through the level in order to maximise the amount of enemies you defeat per minute and minimise allied casualties. So now, all that's really left in the stage is to break through and destroy the enemy commander Zhang Liang. However, at this moment there's an ambush. You can see here Yan Zheng leads the ambush, which means even if you defeated the first ambush from Yi and then moved away, perhaps to fight with Liu Bei at the south side of the map, it forces you to come back and fight this ambush as well, because Huang Fusong, just like he would have been defeated by Yi, he is automatically defeated by Yang Zheng, because Yang Zheng has one more morale point than Huang Fusong does by default, which means you must get involved with this fight in order to prevent yourself from losing the stage. Another beginner's trap for this first level, which is why, as I said, I think it is a little bit harder than the stage we saw last week, which was very simplistic really. At this stage I was wondering whether to go and help Liu Bei in the south with his battle in order to get more experience with my officer, but I decided it would be too much of a run to go across the whole stage, so I decided to head in towards the enemy's main camp.
Spirits of the earth, rise and join our battle for freedom.
So Zhang Liang has another trick up his sleeve, and he's able to make these flame geysers sort of shoot out the ground, which pretty much do nothing as far as I can tell. You can ignore them pretty safely. And here we have to take on Zhang Mangcheng, who's one of the other main Yellow Turban commanders, but isn't really given any particular role in the stories of Dynasty Warriors, despite being one of the senior members of the Yellow Turban Rebellion. I don't think he was related to the other Zhang brothers who were ruling it. Zhang is a very common name in this period in China, and today in fact, so there are lots of Zhangs. For example, we'll be seeing Zhang Fei, I imagine at some point, who's one of the good heroes of the time fighting under Liu Bei, along with Guan Yu. Now here I wanted to show you something in this stage, for anyone who didn't know. If you run to the left and right of the enemy's main camp, there's a life up 10 in a pot sitting on its own. And on the symmetric other side of their camp there's a Musu up 10. Now these are permanent stat ups which increase your life and Musu bar lengths permanently from now on, which is pretty useful. I didn't mention last week that you train your character up by defeating enemy officers, and they drop little permanent power-ups that increase your attack or defense stats very slightly. So gradually as you play the game, your character's stats get higher and higher. Of course though, as you go through Musu mode, the stages get harder and harder, and the enemies get stat modifiers, which means the increase in your stats is usually outweighed by the increase in the enemy stats. So the stages still do get harder as you're training up, but it does mean that you can come back and play again on hard difficulty, for example, and have it not be too difficult. It is possible to play the game on hard difficulty with completely untrained characters, but I decided not to do that, even though it's what I'm most experienced at doing, just because it means the stages take longer and a little bit less interesting, because you spend a lot of time looking for health or being very tactical with your fighting, which can be quite boring. So I'm playing on every version of Dynasty Warriors on normal mode. For now, I might increase it to hard mode a bit later on. So you make it to the back of the enemy camp. Zhang Liang is here. Now, if I had gone to fight Liu Bei and defeated the enemy officer outside the south gate, Zhang Liang at this stage would retreat from the battlefield. He is programmed to run away if all of his the officers in his force have been defeated. This is a bad thing, because if you don't defeat him here, he will make an appearance in the next stage and make life a little bit harder for you. So it's probably better to leave one officer and try and defeat Zhang Liang before he retreats. Or do what I did last week, which is rush into the enemy camp just as he retreats and defeat him before he walks off the map. As you get a few seconds after he decides to leave, where he's still on the stage and you can defeat him. And he's going to go down pretty easy. The Zhang brothers who ruled the Yellow Turban Rebellion were faith healers. This is who they were in history, and this position at this particular time in China's history was extremely powerful because of the level of disease and the level of epidemics all over the country. Faith healers were basically gods to the people because they provided medical services for free, which could be life-saving in some cases. So Zhang Liang is depicted as running away. A lot of the time enemy commanders just run away when you defeat them so that they can conveniently come back later in the story. But anyway, Han forces are victorious, so we head into the battle aftermath. A little look at the replay so you can see how I went past this level. On the left and right we see the morale bars of the units, and the game really gives no indication of how important the morale is to how the battles play out. This game has no tutorial system or anything like that. When you first get it, you have no idea what to do. It doesn't tell you the controls. You have to read the manual quite closely and get a lot of practice before you can really play the game, which makes it a little bit inaccessible, compounded slightly by the fact that the story is inaccessible to someone who hasn't read Romance of the Three Kingdoms or is familiar with the history of the period in another way. So it is very beginner unfriendly. Now I head to the experience screen. I'm keeping up a little longer this time so you can have a look at how it works. You get experience for KOs, worthy opponents, which is basically officers, how quickly you cleared the stage, clear time, and bonus. Bonus is based on how many allied officers survived, I believe, possibly also based on how many gates you've sealed. I got a couple of ranks up. My weapon ranked up as well. Remember, the weapon gets experience for defeating enemy officers, and once it reaches a certain level you get a superior version of the weapon which can do more attacks and more damage, and the bodyguard's got a little bit of experience as well. Now we're going to move on to the first stage of my attempt to do Extreme Mode Mission 1. Now you have to pick a character initially for who you're going to take out. Let me quickly remind you that Extreme Mode is the mode where you have to complete as many stages as you can, one after the other, on a single life bar, although you can get health very occasionally through random drops, and you can buy it in shops, which we'll see in a moment. I'm going to play as Lu Bu, who, although being the best character in the game, so it's kind of cheaty, is really the only character who can do well in Extreme Mode. And since I'm lacking in experience, since I haven't played this for many years, I decided to take it easy on myself. First you pick the first stage you want to go for. The exchange rate determines how much money you'll get for doing it, so you want to go as high as possible, but I actually end up going for the lowest one because of these notes about Guan Yu being around and the possibility that you can get the lightning orb on the stage. When you start a stage, it takes you to a shop screen. Unfortunately, you start with no money, so you can't use it on the first level, but your experience points you get in the stages are converted to money by the exchange rate, and you can buy things like health, you can buy officers to help you out, you can buy troops to help you out, you can buy stats enhancing items. So here we go, we go into the first stage. The stages are randomly generated. It picks a random map, throws down a random bunch of officers, and sets spawn points for random special events. The one on this stage is the bandit leader on the far west, who I'm going to have to try and move towards. It starts you off right in front of the enemy. It's a little bit harsh for this first stage. Now you can see Lu Bu is ridiculously overpowered in this game. I'm ripping through this initial enemy officer who is standing in front of me, and within about 5 seconds of the stage being defeated he died. And he actually dropped a life recovery plus 50 item, which is extremely rare, so that was a nice bit of luck. Although I actually don't need it since I started on full health, so it was a useless bit of luck. It was very lucky to see life recovery dropped by items on Extreme Mode. The whole point is, every time you get hit, it really hurts you because you basically can't get that health back. I have to get ahead a little bit. I found the set of pots, and if you looked closely I found another life recovery plus 50 in the set of pots. So far I've recovered 100 points of health which would be so good later in the Xtreme Mode campaign, but right at the beginning it's completely useless, so I felt really unlucky in a sort of lucky way to have found those items. I have to break through this random set of gates by taking out these guard captains, which is fairly easy. You might notice that I'm spamming the same attack for Lu Bu over and over again. I'm going to use it on this guard captain here, where he just swings his pike around his head and stamps on the floor, sending out a shockwave. Basically this attack is ridiculously good because it clears out enemies in all directions, and the shockwave gets enemies out of the way, so you can then readjust yourself for your next attack without being swamped by the enemies. So this massive crowd of bandits that were fighting Guan Yu goes down super easy. Defeating this bandit leader triggers a special event. Special events either give you items, points, or new companions for your journey. So I'm going to see what Guan Yu gives me.
Thank you. I offer you this item.
He gives me an item, and I believe that was the ice orb, which we'll see a little bit later. So now I have to run all the way to the other end of the stage, and here's Yuan Shao. I still haven't taken any hits on my health, bar those 2 arrows that just hit me, which is very inconvenient. But now things start to get a little bit worse. Yuan Shao manages to hit me before I can start my kill everything attack. I trigger my Musu, and I sort of forget that the Dynasty Warriors 4 version of Lu Bu's Musu isn't as powerful as his Dynasty Warriors 5 version, and it proves not particularly useful. Yuan Shao gets a hit on me, and then one of his bodyguards does as well, so I was getting a little bit annoyed at this stage that I was taking these hits basically for nothing. Managed to take out Yuan Shao though, and it opens a gate which will allow me to go towards the enemy commander and end the stage. In Xtreme Mode you're sort of split between your desire to stay on the stage for as long as you can to maximise your kills and experience, and to get out as quick as you can in order to minimise the risk of losing health. And now Zhihao Yuan comes up, and he hits me twice with his bow straight away, and I was getting really annoyed, and then sort of in my fury I ran forward, got hit by him, he blocks my Musu, and so overall this battle against Zhihao Yuan began very badly. I start using my kill everything move, and he manages to come in and hit me again with 4 hits, devastating. I've lost a third of my health now, which is awful for the first stage of an Extreme Legends. With Lu Bu you can go for hundreds of levels on 1 life bar, and I've already lost a third of it on the first stage, very embarrassing. One excuse I can make for myself is that playing on PC is harder than it is on the console because you're using keyboard commands, which are much less subtle than joysticks for coordinating your movement and targeting. So in the end I lost half my health on that stage, which is highly embarrassing. I was kind of angry and considering filming it again, but I decided to be honest and just go with it. So next stage I'm going to have to be really careful, and if I'm lucky try and find some help. So I found some items, the Horned Helm, which is useless, and the Lightning Orb, which is really good. So at least I've got that. It means the next stage will be a little bit easier. It'll make my kill everything attack even more powerful, because as well as hitting them with the shockwave and pike spins, it will summon down lightning to hit the enemy. So I got just about 2,000 gold for that stage, and when I begin mission 2 I'll be able to spend that gold on whatever I want, whatever's available in the shop. But we'll see that next time. Now I'm moving on towards Empire mode, and before I start my Empire I am going to create a new character. I decided I was going to make my Empire be the Empire of an original character who I'm going to create and throw into the game. Here's Devon, the princess character I created in Dynasty Warriors 4, but I'm going to start a new character. I already had something in mind for what I wanted it to be like, so I'm going to skip over a lot of the character creation here. It's going to use the smallest possible model. I'm going to have gold clothing, and for a weapon I'm going to use the Great Sword. The Great Sword is a weapon not wielded by any of the characters in the game. It was intended for a character who was cancelled, I believe, and not put into the final game, allowing you to use them for edit officers. You have to give your officer a skill. The skill is something only the AI can use, so it's a little bit pointless for me. And now you can pick a stat archetype. Now I was confused by the fact that the Crusader archetype is far superior to all of the other ones, so I was wondering why wouldn't you pick that? There must be some sort of trick. And deciding that there must be a trick, I ended up going for Berserker, which is the one I wanted. So I've gone for a Berserker little girl with a sword twice her height, probably weighs 50 tons. So this character isn't going to be too suspicious on the battlefield, but she's going to be able to do some damage. I called her Yan Mei, which means something like seductress or something in Chinese, I don't know, I just sort of picked it at random. And there we go. I've got my new character, so now we can head into Empire mode, and I'll show you how you start your Empire. You pick the mode, load up a new game, So first you have to pick whether you want to have historical or fictional empire build to begin. I choose for historical, so all the nations already on the map are going to be the ones that would have been there historically. Now you either choose to play as one of the empires that already exists, or you select an unoccupied spot to start your own empire, which is what I'm going to do. First I had a little look around. You can see each area has a set of items associated with it, and these items are the ones that you will be able to produce in the political phase if you own that territory. The game is divided into political and battle phases. In the political phase you make decisions about what your empire is going to do, and in the battle phase you try and invade other empires in order to gain new territory. It gives you 2 random other generals to start you off with. I'll try and replace them as soon as I can though, because they're not very interesting.
Let us make an oath. Let us put an end to the chaos.
What a boring oath. So my 2 generals stare at my enormous sword thrust into the sky. Pretty hot. And here we go. First we begin with my revenue summary. You get a little bit of money each turn. And then we go into the political phase. You have to select a proposal from one of your generals. Each proposal has 2 policies, and you have to decide which 2 policies you think will be most useful to you in this turn and in the long run. I decided to go with Yan Mei's policy to inspect the countryside and hire priestesses for the next battle stage. And people decided they like me because of my listening to their worthless opinions.
Rise, children of the Yellow
And now Zhang Zhao appears, and it seems the Yellow Turban rebellion is going on because I selected the historical start point. So all these yellow bits on the Empire map are Yellow Turban strongholds. So I have the option of taking them fairly easily without really angering any of the other empires, since no one cares who captures Yellow Turban territory. I could have invaded the Nanman province, but I decided not to because the Nanman map on Dynasty Warriors 4 is infamously difficult to deal with because of various area of effect debuffs you get when you walk around, but I'll explain that once I come to fight on that map. So I decided to go here to Nanhai. The poison orb was the item that they can create, which I don't like the poison orb, but I decided to go there anyway. You select which generals you want to take, so I just selected all of mine. Normally you'd get a thing asking what lieutenants you want to put in your army as well, but I don't have enough officers to field lieutenants, so unfortunately I couldn't do it for this battle.
Let's go. Show them what we've got.
The enemy doesn't have enough officers to have lieutenants either though, so we're still evenly matched.
It's time to show them. Let's go.
So we're going to show them. I wonder what we're going to show them. Each area has a characteristic map, so when you do a battle for an area it's always on the same map. The objective is just to capture the enemy main camp. Empires works using completely different game mechanics to both Extreme Legends and the regular Dynasty Warriors 4 which we've seen so far. It uses game mechanics that all of the later Dynasty Warriors games would copy and paste, so they must have decided that this was the best way to organize the levels.
This one will be close.
You have a
Everyone
series
stay
of bases
focused.
which define your territory. On the battle map at the top right you can see there are pink areas of the ground and blue areas of the ground which represent the enemy and allied territory respectively. We saw Yan Mei has an epic charge attack where she like strangles someone and slashes them into the distance. Her combat ability proved to be extremely good. I was very impressed. She basically just swings this giant hunk of metal around as you'd expect, and it takes up pretty much everyone in the way. So the way you advance in Empire stages is you capture bases. Bases are just little patches of ground with flags on them, such as the one I'm in now, and I believe health and power-ups spawn at the bases, so they're important areas to control if you're looking to take on any sort of difficult opponents.
Pretty good.
You capture a base by just killing all of the enemies near it. Likewise, the enemies can capture your bases by doing the same thing. Your allied officers behave kind of strangely in Empire's mode. Sometimes they just stand around and pretend to be defending bases even if there's no reason to. Other times they'll just wildly attack in any direction they want. Find a base on the map they've decided they want to capture and just go for it. Dynasty Warriors 5 Empires was a vast improvement on Dynasty Warriors 4 in this respect, in that you could actually control the allied officers, give them orders, etc. I get stuck behind this horse here, a little bit annoying. Yeah, Dynasty Warriors 4 Empires is very much an experiment. They were trying out this new base game mode with capturing bases being the focus rather than defeating enemy officers. And they must have decided they liked it, as I said, because they pretty much never stopped using it from this point in history onwards for future Dynasty Warriors games. And this is where it all began. It's one of the more satisfying versions of the base-based Dynasty Warriors games, but it is quite obviously the worst, just because they didn't really know what they're doing. The bases are just little pots on the floor, so that there's no real sort of feeling of significance to them. But I must say, in Dynasty Warriors 5, where they made the bases actual buildings, I didn't like that, because it meant that the maps were broken up by these constant series of buildings you had to go in. It was a little bit annoying, especially because they were all identical. Anyway, I advanced a little bit into this enemy castle area. The castle contains multiple bases, but I didn't need to capture them all because the enemy main camp was actually right next to the base I captured outside, which means I can go straight in and capture the main camp. I guess I should mention there's the thing called supply lines. The supply lines define which bases you are able to capture. Basically, you're only able to capture bases which are near bases you've already captured. So the objective on each stage is to capture the enemy main camp. So all you have to really do is capture a base next to the enemy main camp and then capture the main camp. This will create a supply line from your main camp to theirs and allows you to capture it. When I got to the enemy main camp, it was undefended except for a few archers, and I captured it with ease. So there we go, the enemy main camp has been taken, and the first Empire Mode victory has been won. Super easy. I probably should have played it on hard difficulty because that was unbelievably easy. The Empire's Mode, the difficulty does ramp up a lot with each turn. Every turn the enemies get generic stat multipliers and get stronger. Plus they get stat multipliers based on the size of their empires, which makes things harder too later on. You get a summary of your allied casualties and your own experience. All of the officers in your army gain experience and can rank up, which increases their stats. And I captured the officer Ma Zhong. Now you want to capture officers because you can then hire them into your own forces, expanding your army. So I'm going to hire Ma Zhong because I can use him as a lieutenant in any future battles.
This is our first victory.
So it is, Yan Mei.
Control of the land will be ours in no time.
She seems confident, very confident. So then you see what all the other empires in China were doing. It looks like everyone was just invading Yellow Turban territory, and it all succeeded. So the Yellow Turbans have been halved in strength in the first turn. Must be mean to them. And now we get this special event where it asks me to participate in a campaign against the Yellow Turbans. This is a special battle which we're going to be seeing next week.
The Emperor asks for your assistance. Will you honor him?
This guy's a bit creepy.
The Emperor asks us to stop the Yellow Turbans.
Yan Mei is way too short. This looks kind of weird.
So be it. We'll stop them.
Yeah, we'll stop them. So next week we're going to be facing the Yellow Turban Rebellion again, both in Musu mode and in Empire's mode, so it's going to be a double bonus of Yellow Turbans next week. So that's all for this episode of Romance of the Three Games. As always, leave any feedback and comments you have below, and subscribe to this channel if you want to see the adventures of Sun Jian, Lu Bu and Yan Mei continue in the future. Until next time, may all your days be glorious and romantic until the next episode of Romance of the Three Games.